How's it going out there, YouTube? My name is Jesse and I am back for another comic book video. We have had some blockbuster superheroes movies this year. Yes, they have been breaking the box office. So I thought that I would go ahead and do a movie list of my own. I'm going to be doing the top 10 worst videos for Marvel and DC. Yes, it's that kind of a list. But the badness could not be contained in one video. So I'm going to break it off into two. And this will be the first part with the top 10 worst DC movies of all time. Now, if you have a top 10 list that you would like to leave in the comments, I'm always anxious to hear what somebody else's top 10 list is, because the top 10 worst or best list is always subjective. So here's my list of the top 10 worst DC movies of all time. Coming in at number 10, it's not a bad movie per se. It was an okay movie, but with the kind of star power that was in this movie and the characters that they were portraying, the movie should have been a lot better than it was. So that's why this movie comes in at number 10. Coming at number 10, Justice League. Justice League premiered in 2017, starring Batman, Ben Affleck, Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, Superman, Henry Cavill, Aquaman, Jason Momoa, and Flash, Ezra Miller. Had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 40%, but a decent audience score of 75%. The movie was okay, but it should have been better than an okay movie, considering the characters that they are portraying and the star power that was in this movie. They didn't give us any introduction movies except for Wonder Woman and Superman. We weren't invested in them. And the amount of CG that was in this movie was just, ugh. Not to mention the very end with all the orange that Joss Whedon put in. It can only be described as 50 Shades of Orange. Now, coming in at number 9, I didn't actually think that this was too bad of a movie, but there were certain parts of this movie that dragged. I heard that there was a script rewrite after the movie had been mostly filmed. There was a lot of stuff that didn't belong in this movie. It's like they were trying to include too much. And that just becomes it just becomes cluttered. It doesn't look good. Here's coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 9, Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad starred Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie, Joker, Jared Leto, and Deadshot, Will Smith, with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 27%, had a decent audience score of 60%. This movie had a lot of pacing problems. It was kind of going all over the place at one point, and it didn't give us an origin story for half the members on the team. If you didn't know who they are, you wouldn't know where they came from. Captain Boomerang, Killer Croc, Katana, they were never fully explained, so you had no investment in them. Now, coming in at number 8, the movie seemed aimless and directionless at times. There were plot holes and build-ups that either led us absolutely nowhere or didn't pay off nearly as well as it was supposed to. The title of the movie gave us exactly what it promised us. 8.5 minutes of it. And if you haven't guessed, well, here's number 8. Coming in at number 8, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Batman vs. Superman premiered in 2016, starring Batman Ben Affleck, Superman Henry Cavill, Lex Luthor Jesse Eisenberg, and Wonder Woman Gal Gadot, with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 27% and an audience score of 63%. This movie was just wrong. Jesse Eisenberg is not Lex Luthor. In fact, in the previews, I thought he was the Riddler. It's just, this movie is just so messy and ill thought of. And the scenes with Gal Gadot before she comes up as Wonder Woman, they look like they were filmed and crammed into the movie as an afterthought, not part of the original filming. And then it was called Batman vs. Superman. We were given an 8.5 minute fight. It felt like we were really kind of cheated. Now, coming in at number 7 and number 6. Number 6 probably deserved to be a little lower on this list, but I grouped them together because they were part of the same thing. Number 7 and number 6. Does the name Joel Schumacher mean anything to you? Well, if it does, then you know the next 2 entries. If it doesn't, here they are. Coming in at number 7. Batman Forever. Batman Forever premiered in 1995. Batman Forever stars Batman Val Kilmer, Robin Chris O'Donnell, Dr. Meridian Chase Nicole Kidman, Riddler Jim Carrey, and Two-Face Tommy Lee Jones. This movie was supposed to be a lighter take on Batman after Batman Returns was so dark. I don't know what Joel Schumacher was thinking with this movie, but it was pretty bad, and Val Kilmer is not Batman. This movie had a Rotten Tomato score of 39% and an audience score of 32%. And it's just a mess of a movie, especially with Tommy Lee Jones trying to out Jim Carrey. If you don't believe me, see the movie. Coming in at number 6, Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin premiered in 1997. It starred Batman, George Clooney, Robin, Chris O'Donnell, Batgirl, Alicia Silverstone, Mr. Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Poison Ivy, Uma Thurman. George Clooney is definitely not Batman, even more than Val Kilmer is not Batman. This movie is horribly worse than the first one before it. It feels like Joel Schumacher watched Adam West's Batman and go, hey, I can do puns too. There's so many puns in the first 30 minutes, you're just like, oh dear God, why? Watching a review of this movie would be less torture than watching the actual movie itself. And it even coined the phrase, bat nipples. Watch a review, they'll cover it, trust me. With a Rotten Tomato score of 10% and an audience score of 16%. Now, coming in at number 5, I don't see how you screw this movie up. It was such great potential, and the possibilities for this thing were endless. There was a lot of history attached to this. The only limits for this movie was your own imagination, which is why I can't understand why this movie bombed so badly. Here's number 5. Coming in at number 5, Green Lantern. Green Lantern premiered in 2011. It stars Green Lantern Ryan Reynolds and Carol Ferris, Blake Lively. It wasn't a bad movie so much as so many missed opportunities is what made the movie bad. And they did have the CG suit, and that was pretty horrible. But there were so many things that it was capable of that they didn't do. So it was more of a missed opportunity than anything else. With a Rotten Tomato score of 26% and an audience score of 45%. Now, coming in at number 4, part of the poor box office showing for this movie was that nobody knew who the hero was, really, unless you're hardcore in the comics. And don't get me wrong, it's a bad movie. I mean, it really is. This hero probably could have stood with a real origin movie because the powers were so ill-defined. You're sitting here wondering half the time, how is he doing this? So a proper origin movie for him instead of just introing him in, and in the first 5 minutes, I'm expecting to understand his powers. I mean, he's not Batman. He's not Superman. We don't know who he is. Give us a proper origin movie with him first. Here is number 4. Coming in at number 4, Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex premiered in 2010. It stars Jonah Hex, Josh Brolin, Lila, Megan Fox, and Quentin Turnbull, John Malkovich. This movie really needed an origin story. I mean, first of all, not many people know who he is, so there's one of your fails right there. And then his powers were ill-defined. We didn't know his relationship with the people who were helping him, and we really didn't know his powers. He was moving silently at some times, but not others, and bringing people back from the dead by touching them. It was really kind of a mess. An origin story movie before this one would have really helped cement things together. It had a Rotten Tomato score of 12% and an audience score of 20%. Coming in at number 3, the premise of the movie sounded good, but I think that they were just trying to dip from a well that really didn't have anything left to give. And part of it may have been the writers, part of it may have been the era in which these movies came out in. But it was bad, and it comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 3, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Superman 4 premiered in 1987. It stars Superman Clark Kent, Christopher Reeves, Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman, and Lois Lane, Margot Kidder. This was a subpar production company with horrible green screen, horrible stock footage, horrible plot in general. The movie felt lackluster, boring, and ill-conceived in every single sense of the word. And it's almost the worst movie on this list, with a Rotten Tomato score of 12% and an audience score of 15%. Now, number 2, I don't like to throw around the word god-awful, but it really leans heavily that way. The costume didn't look like it was supposed to. The actor that they got for it was actually not a bad idea, considering the fact that he towered above everybody. It's the acting is kind of stilted. The costume designs are kind of out there. They tried to do something and ultimately failed. Of course, the hero wasn't really well known either. It was kind of like, hey, here's a new superhero, accept it. They didn't. The movie is bad. And here comes number 2. Coming in at number 2, Steel. Steel, which came out in 1997, stars John Henry Iron Steel, played by Shaquille O'Neal, and Nathaniel Burke, played by Judd Nelson. Steel was basically, it was Batman. He makes a suit to protect him on the streets with high-tech gizmos, including a grappling hook and a motorcycle to get away from the cops. And he even has a computer hacker female assistant who has a spinal contusion and works from a wheelchair. Anybody else see the similarities? I sure do. Steel had a Rotten Tomato score of 12% and an audience score of 15%. Now, this is just a couple of movies that are also bad DC movies. They didn't make the list, but they could easily have. So, take a look at these before we get to number 1. Now, since I haven't mentioned it yet, you can probably guess which movie is coming in at number 1. It is a perfect example of how not to do a superhero movie. There are so many edits on each action scene, it literally makes it difficult to watch. It's difficult to watch because it's a bad movie, but since there's so many camera angles on even the simplest of action scenes, it makes it very hard to watch the movie. There are a couple of tracking shots where it's one continuous frame, which shows that they had the ability to do this, but the camera work is just god-awful. The one-liners in this movie make you cringe, and the way they stereotype this thing, it almost feels like it's a Joel Schumacher film, even though it's not. Here is number 1. Coming in at number 1 is Catwoman. Ugh. Catwoman came out in 2004. It stars Catwoman, Patience Phillips, not Selena Kyle, Catwoman, played by Halle Berry, and Laura Hayter, whatever, played by Sharon Stone. This is a horrible movie. The edits and everything that remotely looks like action makes it literally difficult to watch. Not only is the movie misconjointed, totally misses the point of Catwoman, and hits on every single cat stereotype, climbs up walls, drinks milk, horrible puns. It feels like a Joel Schumacher movie, but his name is not attached to it. I looked. And the arch villain, she's powered by face cream. Oh my god. This is everything a superhero movie should not be. It's just horrible. That's why it comes in at number 1. Well, that's it for this list. I want to say I hope you enjoyed this list, but considering what I covered, that's probably not what you're going to walk away with this. If you haven't seen any of the movies on the list, don't watch them or watch them at your own peril. I just recently watched Catwoman so I could properly review it. I wish I hadn't. Well, that's it for this top 10. It was hard to get through. Well, be ready for next week when we do Marvel's top 10 worst movies of all time. Oh, and there's some doozies on that list. So, until next time, I'll be seeing you.